If you are impoverished, then that's going to increase your vulnerability to developing mental health problems. When I left Lebanon at the age of 17, came to the UK, that's when I witnessed my first homicide. I was deeply sensitized to the events that were unfolding in Lebanon at the time. So you wake up one morning to discover that your hometown is bombed.
I want to ask you about the racism that you might have experienced at that point in your life.
My dream was to become a doctor, right? And then people would look at me and the first question they would ask me is, can you speak English?
Did you feel that people doubted you so much that they expected you to not go very far?
Oh God, yeah. I would say even they tried to sabotage you.
Professor Ahmed Hankir, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me, Becky. Dr. Becky.
I have been really excited about doing this interview with you because I think there's not enough people in our industry who actually talk about their own suffering, their own mental health struggles. So you're very transparent about this. I mean, you first called yourself the wounded healer on your social media. So this tells me that you want to kind of show the world that it's okay to be a mental health practitioner and to struggle and to show some vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, I would say it's more than okay. But I've embraced my vulnerability and I've always been open, honest, and transparent about my mental health experiences because it's nothing to be ashamed about. And it's the most effective way to not just reduce stigma, but to reject stigma. And so it's very much part and parcel of my identity. I would say it's an integral ingredient of my identity, living with a mental health condition. So I will continue to share my experiences.
And what is that mental health condition?
So I'm not a big fan of psychiatric labels. Personally, I think it depends on the individual. Some people find it helpful, others don't. I mean, I've recently discovered that I have ADHD, which I didn't know about.
Just like me.
Just like you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't a formal diagnosis. I spoke with an expert in neurodevelopmental conditions. You have to be careful with words here. I was about to say disorder, but it has a certain connotation, doesn't it? And he's a consultant psychiatrist, and he lives with ADHD. Is that autism? And I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. And he's done like thousands of assessments, and he's known me for a long time. And he said, yeah, you've got ADHD. So I know that I can be hyperactive and that it can be difficult to govern my impulses. And I've definitely struggled with attention. So yeah, that makes sense that I've got that condition. But my mood can oscillate for sure. There is definitely a mood component. I can be melancholic and drown myself in my sorrows like there's no tomorrow. So that's the I guess the low mood aspect. And sometimes my mood can go up as well. But I prefer to describe my experiences. So I hope that answers your question.
What triggers your depression?
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I'm working as a consultant psychiatrist and I carry out my assessments and I conduct a mental state examination and I ask my patients, is there an identifiable trigger? And there isn't always an identifiable trigger. I think of it like things that happen outside of us, environmental factors, like a genocide. I can't say the G word here in the UK, and the fear of getting cancelled, but trauma, conflict, things like that. These are things that happen outside of us. We talk about adverse childhood experiences, neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse from a person who should have been a source of unconditional love, right? A primary caregiver, a parent, for example. So these are all examples of, I think, external triggers, if you like. But there are things that happen inside of us as well, right? So we can have emotionally available parents. We can have happy childhoods, but there are still things that can happen inside of us, right? Physiological changes, biological changes. And I was providing care to a patient, and she said that she thinks that she has PMDD, right? Premenstrual dysphoric disorder. These are things that happen inside of us, the physiological changes, the hormonal changes. So I think these are some of the triggers. I mean, for me, not so much what's happening inside of me, it's more what's happening outside of me. If you think about it, like I was reflecting on this on my way here, like poverty, right? If you are impoverished, then that's going to increase your vulnerability to developing mental health problems. Because if you are impoverished, you are likely to experience accommodation insecurity, right? And you have more difficulty accessing healthcare, especially if you live in the US, for example, where there is, I wouldn't say it's universal healthcare in the US. I know they have a different model over there, but really want to emphasize, like, these are things that happen outside where you live, the area you live. You know, if you live in wherever, you know, Chelsea, or as opposed to some more rougher neighborhoods, then that can be more protective, living in a salubrious environment as opposed to living in an environment that can be squalid and that is conducive of mental illness.
Is this something that you can relate to in your younger life? Did you
Oh God,
experience poverty?
yeah. Oh, definitely. You know, I mean, we know that people from lower income backgrounds are underrepresented in medical schools, and you know, I left my family when I was 17, back in Lebanon. I mean, I was born in the UK. I was born in Belfast, and I was raised in Dublin, and I'm grateful for that. Don't get me wrong. Then from 12 to 17, I was living in Lebanon, which was still very much recovering from the devastating conflict in the 80s. We didn't have 24-hour electricity. The buildings would have bullet holes. The walls would have bullet holes. But this was before the fragmentation of the family. So I was living with my parents and with my siblings. And so in a sense that was like a buffer against the political situation in Lebanon at the time. But there were not many opportunities. So a lot of people were living in poverty. And that tends to happen in the global south, right? And in lower middle income countries. So then when I left Lebanon at the age of 17, came to the UK, first job was working in a van selling burgers and kebabs for a living. This was in Malvern Hills, never forget, 17 years old. And that's when I witnessed my first homicide. Apparently, it was supposed to be the safest place to live in England, Malvern Hills, not too far away from Worcester. And unfortunately, there was a person there, and he was attacked by a bunch of men who were clearly intoxicated, and they were stomping his head, and I witnessed it. And so that was challenging.
What did you do in that incident?
I mean, I don't know if this is the hero in me. You know, I wanted to intervene. I was working in this van with, I don't know if he was an asylum seeker or a refugee or an immigrant. He's from Chechnya. And he's been doing this for like a long time. He was a lot older than me. And like we were the only visible ethnics in the area at the time. And he said, do you have any idea what will He didn't have to say it to me. He grabbed onto my arm, and he didn't, like I said, he didn't say anything verbally, but I felt it. He's like, don't go anywhere, because these people who were intoxicated, likely they may be racist as well, and they would kill you too. So I couldn't do anything. But it's interesting. I was able to think about that now, because the question he asked me was, I guess, did you experience poverty? Absolutely. When I was working in a van selling burgers and kebabs for a living. And my dream was to become a doctor, right? And then people would look at me, and the first question they would ask me is, can you speak English? So talk about, you know, like, I don't know, like these perceptions that we have of people who seek sanctuary, right? Maybe because of the complexion of my skin. I don't know what I was doing at the time. But yeah, I did experience poverty in the material sense, I guess. But I remember coming, and it's all relative, isn't it, Becky? Because I've seen, what is poverty? How do you define poverty, right? How we define poverty here in the UK is one thing, and how we define poverty in low and middle income countries is another. You know, you go to places in the world where you don't work, you don't eat. You know, look what's happening in Gaza right now. You know, that's poverty, right? You don't have secure accommodation. So coming here, like working on a minimum wage, in a sense, you know, am I experiencing poverty? I guess relative to the people here, but then like in the bigger scheme of things, no. And the reason why I volunteered that information is because my reference point was what I was seeing in Lebanon. We have a lot of Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, for example, and you see what they experience. You're like, actually, you know what? Minimum wage here is not poverty, right? So it's all relative. Not that people here in the UK are not suffering. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, no, I did experience poverty, but I was able to break the poverty cycle.
You were 17 and you came to the UK and you did speak English.
Yeah, I spoke fluent English. English is my first language.
I want to ask you about the racism that you might have experienced at that
Yeah.
point in your life.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's not so visible. It's more. I would say it's more subtle. Like, things. For example, people might say, "Oh, your English is good." What does that mean exactly? Did you have that preconception of me that I'm not able to articulate myself eloquently in the English language? Things like that, for example. Also, I'm not the only person who says this. Sometimes it feels like you have to work harder. Can you quantify that? 10 times harder? You feel like you have to work 10 times harder than a person who is whatever, not from a minority ethnic background in the UK. Again, also, there's that derogatory term. It begins with the letter P. I don't even want to say it now in public. If you're a person of color, then you have to be from that specific background, right? Things like that. So at the workplace, I would say even with my career progression as well, in the field of psychiatry, we know that people of color are overrepresented in mental health care services. You are 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act if you are black compared to if you are not black. And the evidence is clear in my mind, certainly, that your ethnic background contributes to that statistic. There are other factors that contribute as well. But racism, I think, continues to be an issue, especially now with like all the rhetoric now, right? And the rise of the far right. And but you try to be impervious to it. You try to be immune to it, but it still affects you.
It sounds like a lot of the racism was subtle and that you were perceiving it, you were picking up on it. It was seeping into your soul. People were treating you like a second-class citizen, but it was maybe hard to prove, but it was very much felt.
Well, there's that plausible deniability, isn't there? For example, you feel like when you apply for a job and you don't get it, there, like I said, the plausible deniability, right? But you feel, wait a second, if my name was whatever, John Smith, and I middle upper class and went to Eton or Westminster or whatever and graduated from Oxbridge, then things would be very different, right? But obviously you have to question your own reactions as well. But I would agree, it's more kind of like these maybe microaggressions, and I know I'm repeating myself, but it's the plausible deniability. But deep down inside, you feel it inside. The real reason why I didn't get that job was because of my ethnicity or my race. But,
this must have been very hurtful to you, and also must have been difficult for your sense of self, your self-esteem.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, you try your best not to internalize it. And also I'm grateful as well. I'm grateful to have these opportunities, but yeah, you feel it, definitely, especially if you have RSD, right? If you have rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, which is a symptom or a trait of ADHD. So that might explain some of the hypersensitivity, right, to rejection and to criticism. But you definitely, of course, you feel it, and it's upsetting, and it's depressing, and it's traumatizing, and it shouldn't be like that, But it's great when you can talk openly about these things. I think we need to be able to have open and honest discussions about these topics, which can be difficult. But I mean, I really want to emphasize, I identify as British. I'm proud to be British in the sense that I've contributed to British society. I've worked with the National Health Service. I've suffered with the British people, I love going to Greg's, if that makes me British. But yeah, so there's a lot to be positive about as well, for sure. I don't want to kind of dwell just on, some of my negative experiences. Plenty of positive experiences as well. And the diversity here in the UK is something to be embraced, for sure.
What did you do with that trauma, if we want to call it trauma?
Yeah.
How did it influence what you did next in your
Definitely.
life?
You try to transmute the trauma, right? You try to, because the trauma, I mean, the way I conceptualize it is the trauma can be painful, right? And pain generates energy. So often I would say, like, what is anger? What is rage? Anger, rage, these are manifestations of pain, right? And so what you do with that pain, what you do with the energy, right, that is generated from that pain, you try to harness it, right? It can drive you, it can compel you, right? And people, the haters or the naysayers, they might have expectations of you. They might say, you will never amount to anything in life, and which perhaps is more a reflection of them than it is on you. And I can't deny it. It's gratifying when you achieve your goals, and in a sense, you're like saying to them, you were wrong. Yeah.
Did you feel that people doubted you so much that they expected you to not go very far?
Oh
in
God,
life?
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it goes beyond not expecting me to go far. I would say even they try to sabotage you. They don't want you to succeed. And we spoke about ego earlier on, because it might be that there's something about you that activates their ego. It makes them feel insecure, and they don't want, as I said, they don't want you to succeed. So they might try to sabotage you. Oh yeah, that is not an uncommon occurrence for sure.
So then you entered the medical
Oh my God.
profession.
Well, I mean, I had to do my A levels, and that was challenging because I wasn't living with my parents. I was 17, turning 18.
Who were you living with?
I was living with my twin brother. He's a professor in Trinity now. I'm very proud of him. And my older brother, he was 1 year older than me. So just three of us, just three young men, and I had to work full time to survive.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you don't, yeah. So I was studying A levels full time, and I was working full time. So I do like 14-hour shift on. Yeah. I mean, I look back now and I don't know how I did it. Like I would do a 14-hour shift in Marks and Sparks on a Saturday, a 14-hour shift on a Sunday, and then you have to go to sixth form, Monday to Friday, and then you do like the 4-hour shift on Monday, 4-hour shift on Wednesday, 4-hour shift on Friday, just to make ends meet, right?
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
And then you
this
have
is
to get into the
survival.
most competitive course in university, which is medical school, right? So I had to work extremely hard. Yeah. Looking back, I don't know how I did it, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah. It was really intense. Yeah.
Were you just like in survival mode, not
Yeah.
really feeling because you were just going for what you wanted?
Definitely. Yeah. You are in survival mode for sure, because it was like my dream. And it was almost like the fear of not getting into medical school. Like I had to do everything that was humanly possible to get in. So I was very disciplined. I was very focused. And I was also very active too, physically active, and I think that was definitely a factor that contributed to my resilience at the time. But there was a fire burning in my belly and thunder in my heart. I was determined to realize my dream to become a doctor, and somehow I got into medical school. I matriculated into medical school. Yeah,
Why medicine?
medicine. I mean, for me, it's like I don't know how this will sound, but I'll just say it. Like I always wanted to help people, right? I always wanted to heal, right? Hence why I identify as a wounded healer. And for me, it was just like naturally that medicine would give me that opportunity to serve society. And I was a lot younger back then. Maybe that's romantic of me to say, but yeah, I genuinely wanted to help people and to heal people. And so that's the function I felt that medicine, that being a doctor could serve.
Why did you want to heal people?
Yeah, why not, right? There's so much pain in this world that we have this wounded. I'm a wounded healer. We have a wounded world, right? And it's my values, maybe my faith influences my determination to help those who are less fortunate. I mean, it's just how can we not heal people and help those who are less fortunate? Yeah.
What were you picking up on in your environment about people needing healing? Where were you seeing that?
I mean, you see it a lot in low and middle income countries. I saw it a lot in Lebanon, for example. I think that's what really, and also my father as well. He's a physician. He works in Lebanon, and he treats people who can't afford to pay for healthcare. So my father was and remains a role model. I saw what he was doing for his local community, and I wanted to emulate him.
So then you started med school.
Yeah, Manchester Medical School. Yeah, 2003. That was interesting. Yeah, that was really intense. Looking back, I think I was experiencing psychological distress. It was, adjusting because I did my A levels in Leeds, and Manchester's a bit bigger, right? A bit faster, and I didn't know anyone in Manchester at the time, so I felt very isolated and disconnected, and it was really intense. Yeah. So, but I managed to pass my first year. I think I really struggled with identity as well back then. Like in a sense, searching for my soul, asking myself, who am I, right? And we know that people who, we know that if you are, for example, if you do seek sanctuary, or if you are an immigrant, if you are a first-generation immigrant or a second-generation immigrant, that can increase your risk of developing certain mental health conditions. But you can experience an identity crisis, right? You know, am I too Eastern to be Western? Am I too Western to be Eastern? And we all long to belong, right? Where is my tribe? You know, I don't drink alcohol. Almost immediately you feel like you are socially excluded, right? The first question people ask is, why don't you drink alcohol, right? So yeah, there was that exclusion. There was that kind of that in a sense that identity crisis. Really learning more about myself, my own development, my own psychosocial development, my own psychosexual development. All of that I felt was stunted. And then you have neurodevelopmental condition, right? Like you don't understand at the time why am I feeling. Why am I so intense? Why am I reacting in this way? Is the fault with me? Is this character flaw? Where is this all this kind of hyperactivity coming from? This impulsivity, and at the time you don't realize it's because you are neurodiverse, right? Then you have these oscillations in mood, and then there's the unresolved trauma you're trying to process as well. It's just one thing after the other. There was a lot for me to metabolize. And I think I'm still processing that to this day, hence the power of therapy, the power and beauty of therapy, right? So you get these insights.
And then what happened at medical school?
Yeah, medical school, I would say I initially I used the term breakdown, right? And then...
So when you say breakdown, you're kind of describing what people might call a psychological breakdown.
Yeah, a psychological breakdown, a mental health breakdown, is it a psychiatric breakdown? You know, there's breaking point, right? You reach breaking point, and we all have a breaking point. And I often quote this. I think I should know this. He's a psychiatrist. It was published in The Lancet. His name is C.S. Myers. He said everyone has a breaking point, weak or strong, cowardly or courageous, war frightened everyone witless. And I wasn't in Lebanon at the time. This was during the 2006 Lebanon-Israel war. And my parents were in Lebanon. And I was deeply sensitized to the events that were unfolding in Lebanon at the time. So you wake up one morning to discover that your hometown is bombed. And you can't believe it. You're like, and that's where your family live.
Wow.
Yeah, and did they survive? So that was overwhelming, and you feel powerless. And you're so angry. This isn't fair, right? What's going on? Like what we're seeing now. That was just a factor. There were other factors that contributed to reaching breaking points. So initially I framed it as a breakdown, but then you harness the power of reframing and you think, actually, that was a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And it can be a breakthrough for many reasons, right? Because let's talk about friends, right? So this is the digital age, right? And we have different platforms, Facebook, whatever, Insta. So I think you'll agree with me that everyone who is your friend on Facebook is your friend in real life, right? So what's a friend, right? Yeah, exactly. So you get to this break. It's a breakthrough because you learn not to treat someone a priority who only treats you as an option. Why am I doing that? Why am I treating someone a priority who only treats me as an option? And that makes you vulnerable to what? Betrayal trauma. Do we even know what betrayal trauma is? You know, when you keep on giving and giving and giving, and this other person keeps on taking and taking and taking. So when I had that breakthrough, I'm realizing, wait a second, I'm learning more about what a friend is. And also, what about me? Am I fulfilling my duty as a friend? So that's what I mean by breakthrough. And it was, I guess, educational.
So you have this psychological breakdown and
Yeah.
you're linking it to something to do with attachment figures there because you mentioned friends or that you were giving too much or you were giving a lot and then there was this emotional breakdown or breakthrough where I'm imagining emotions were released that needed to be released that potentially had been suppressed.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's interesting because, I mean, you can even say it was like a psychiatric breakdown. I'm a psychiatrist, right? And I know that we use the medical model and it's not flawless and it's being criticized. Sure. But I just was not able to function. At that moment, I was just not able to function. And, I mean, my mind was all over the place. It was torn asunder. And talk about the expression of emotion. There was like so much pain and so much anger and so much rage, and I was not coherent, and I was forced to enter up medical school. So I would certainly say that in the I guess the acute phase, if you like, looking at it through a psychiatric lens, for sure I was it was, I guess, a psychiatric breakdown for sure. Yeah.
I really want to understand this because it's a very significant thing to happen in someone's life.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love that you see it as a breakthrough, and I couldn't agree with that more as someone who has had probably about 2 emotional breakdowns that
Yeah.
were very healing for me. So, I think sometimes we can get really broken in order to build ourselves
Oh yeah,
back
absolutely.
up.
There's post-traumatic growth, right, and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I really want to understand what was going on for you before the breakthrough, which led to a breakthrough. So you mentioned war, you mentioned fear that your family weren't going to survive,
That they were killed. Yeah.
that they were killed. And then you also mentioned sort of giving a lot, or friendships and giving a lot, or perceived friendships and maybe not getting enough back. So I'd love you to articulate for me what led to the breakdown.
Yeah. I mean, we have to talk about poverty as well, because I was a medical student in Manchester.
Yeah.
And I think many students can relate to this, right? When you're broke, right, and you just,
Yeah.
you can't make ends meet, and especially if you're from a low-income background. So don't forget, in medical school, students from low-income backgrounds are underrepresented, right? And then you compare, I think inevitably, because you have roommates, and you see what wealth that they have, the resources that they have access to, what the inherited wealth, right?
Yeah.
And you can't believe it, right? Because it's like they go during whatever, they might go to Latin America or Belize or whatever, and you're having to work. You're having to work, right, during the summer holidays, for example. It's not even a holiday, is it? And so I think when you inevitably make that comparison, it's going to have an impact on your mental well-being. So, but just poverty in and of itself, right? It's supposed to be a holiday, and it's not a holiday. You're having to work to earn money to save to pay for the semester or whatever. So that can be damaging because you need time off. You need to be able to declutter your mind or decompress or whatever, and you were deprived of that opportunity to do that because you have to work to survive.
And you're facing huge inequality. You're seeing that these
Oh
people
yeah,
have
yeah, exactly.
privilege.
You're exactly. Not you're seeing it, and you're feeling it, and you're experiencing it. And it's firsthand, right? It's like it's in your face, like literally. It's in the. My roommates were very wealthy, like most of the other medical students, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not attacking them or criticizing them, but. It's just that the inequality, and you feel it. So there's the poverty aspect of it, and then there's also it's very competitive medical school. It's like cutthroat, right? We talk about the hidden curriculum,
Yeah.
right? You may have, I don't know, the viewers or the listeners may not have come across this before, but medicine can be very competitive. It is very competitive, and even like. Your own friends, they might have access to a resource of questions from previous exams, and they won't share it with you, right? These are people who you think are your own friends, and you would think that your own friends want what's best for you. And in Islam we say you are not a true believer unless you want for your brother that which you want for yourself. It's a beautiful, beautiful saying. You are not a true believer unless you want for your brother what you want for yourself. And so I got that mindset. I want my friend, my brother to succeed, and yet you discover that they are concealing whatever material that could potentially, make things easier for you. So things like that. And then I remember, I was depressed initially, and then whatever the dean, there was like an interim report or something, and he was reading out from this report. I'm like, that's not me. You talk with conviction as if you know who I am. That's not me. And so then I was like on survival mode, really studying. I was studying 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day for 6 months, and I think that also increased my vulnerability. But then I was able to retain so much information as well. And it was like the perfect storm. And then also I think I had some issues with my own family. I felt like I was, in a sense, neglected or maybe even abandoned. That was that was the perception. If that wasn't the reality, that was certainly the perception.
Why was that the perception?
Well, I see what parents are doing for my my peers and my and my friends, and I'm like, oh, the support they're getting, and I'm like, I'm not getting any support here. That's how it felt. And then also, there's a cultural element to this as well. Like, how dare you even entertain that thought that you are being neglected or abandoned? You should be subservient to your parents, and there should be almost like this kind of blind obedience, and I think there are multiple cultures that are like that. You don't, not for a moment do you question your own upbringing, right? The upbringing that you received was flawless, and how dare you question it? So that was a factor as well, for sure.
What was the family situation? So you and your twin brother arrived when you were 17
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
How did you come to be here? What was the decision making behind
that's an important question, and I mean, I want to make it very clear, because my passage into the UK was relatively easy. I've got a British passport. I was born in Belfast.
Yeah.
I'm a British citizen, and you see
some people like to claim you as being Irish.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. And I'm, I identify as, that's another ingredient of my identity, right? And I remember when I gave a keynote when we met in Ireland, and it was beautiful.
I remember the reason I say some people like to claim you as Ireland, because they told me you were going to be there. Like, he's Lebanese Irish.
Yeah.
So Irish people are very proud that you are Irish.
And I know that. I mean, that's very touching, isn't it? When I hear something like that, I feel it in my heart. So, and I mean, I have very fond memories of. I lived in Ireland until I was, I think, 7 or 8 years old. Obviously, the world's a different. It's a very different place at that age to live in, but no, and it's definitely an ingredient of my identity. But I have a British passport, so I have an Irish passport as well, and that made things so much easier for me to come back to the UK. But then I think there was also some naivety as well. Bless them, my parents. They thought, okay, don't worry, you've got a British passport, everything will be okay. Like the British government will take care of you. And so in a sense, it did feel like abandonment, almost like, they abdicated their parental responsibility. You were no longer, you were no longer our responsibility. You're 17, turning 18. You can go take care of yourself. So, I'm still, I think, processing that.
Can I just ask you about that conversation? Oh, yeah. How was it phrased to you? Was it like, you're 17 now, you're pretty much an adult, or nearly?
Far from it, but certainly neurodevelopmentally, right? Your brain is still developing. Some people say it's up until the age of 25. You talk about the prefrontal cortex, right, and things like that. But sorry, I didn't mean to interject.
So your parents are perceiving you as almost an adult, and then it's like, you've got a British passport. We think it's a good idea for you to go to the UK where you'll have a better life.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Because England is a developed country, Lebanon is a developing country, and they genuinely, you're absolutely right. They genuinely wanted what was better for me. But I think that was naive of them to think that, and bless them. I don't mean to attack them. They're my parents, and I have to be respectful. It's interesting because I have a sister, and so people think that there's this patriarchy whereby it's like the men are the beneficiaries of the patriarchy, right? But it's interesting because my sister actually benefited from being a female. So if you're a man, you have to fend for yourself, right? Go into the UK, you're a man, you can take care of yourself. There's no financial support. You're on your own, but you're a man, and you have a British passport, and the government will take care of you. Whereas my sister received all of the limited resources that we had. So she actually went to the most prestigious university in the Middle East, the American University of Beirut, because she's a girl. They couldn't use the passport argument with my sister because she's a girl. No, we can't send her to England because she's a girl. And I think the feminists would agree with me here, that doesn't sound like equal treatment. I don't know, not that I want to antagonize or provoke anyone, but the point is that because she's a girl, she benefited from that. Whereas the men, you're on your own. You get no support from us. And that might explain why 75% of female suicides are completed by men. It might explain why more men are homeless. It might explain why more men are incarcerated. That almost that perception that you're a man, you can take care of yourself. Yeah, and how much of that is influenced by culture? I think we can explore that. Yeah.
I was just going to ask about that because that was your parents' perception. Men are stronger than women. We need to protect our daughter more than we need to protect our boys.
Yeah, yeah.
How much of that did they pick up from their lived experience and their culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't know if I can't quantify that. I haven't really had that discussion with my parents. Yeah, I think it was just we were always expected to passively accept that. I think the boys, and I mean it's interesting, isn't it? Like, can you imagine applying to UCAS, right, or the student loans company, right? And it's like there's limited resources, right? And you say you get the response. The letter is no, your application has been rejected. Why? Because you're a man. You can go take care of yourself, right? But if you're a female applying for, and I know this is very. It's sensitive, isn't it? Because when we start talking about gender roles and people can get defensive. I guess they can get defensive, but I mean I can talk about what happened with our specific family and the decision making process.
But is that common in Lebanese culture?
No, I don't think it is. No, usually it's like, and I mean it's Lebanon is unique, right? Because some people say it's not like we speak Arabic in Lebanon, but it's not like other Arabic-speaking nations in the region, right? For example, in the Gulf, for example, it's almost like this blend of Europe and the Arab world, right? And Beirut they called it the Paris of the Middle East. I know it's a trope, right? But still, like, it was very European in its way. It was very liberal in its thinking. So I think in other Arab nations, it might be like, oh, take care of the men, right? That's the patriarchy, right? The woman, just let them get married or whatever, and I don't know what. It's a horrible generalization, and I don't mean to perpetuate that generalization, but I'm just trying to, I guess, explain. Certainly, my understanding is the patriarchy is no. The men are taken care of. The men are prioritized. Whatever limited resources we have, all allocated to the men. That didn't happen. Certainly not in our household. No, the limited resources we had were all allocated to one individual. And because you're a man, you go take care of yourself.
Right.
That's what happened in our household. Is that a reflection of broader Lebanese society and Lebanese culture? I don't think so. No, that might be more a reflection of maybe, for example, in other Arabic-speaking nations, but not so much in Lebanon. I think it very much depends on the household. There might be some households that have that type of, mentality. Other households don't.
Do you think that was influenced by your parents' upbringing? And
oh God, yeah, absolutely. And we talk about that, don't we? We talk about that, right? We talk about intergenerational, maybe values, intergenerational trauma, right? And who benefits and who doesn't. But I mean, I would say that was a disadvantage for sure. Yeah, I don't know how things would have turned out, if I had the XX chromosomes as opposed to the XY. But
so you feel like you weren't protected as much as you needed at that age?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, of course, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was 17. I was thrust. I mean, I witnessed my first homicide when I was 17 years old. And I didn't have that emotional safety.
Yeah.
And it was like you talk about it was. I mean, even now thinking about it, I mean, I'm on survival mode at the moment. You think about when your nervous system is activated and in overdrive, and it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? I mean, what is fawn, right? But fawn is almost like it's when you are on survival mode, right? You try to overcome the trauma because you want to be agreeable, don't you? You want to have allies, right? I wasn't ready. Definitely not. No, I'm still processing that trauma to this day for sure. Yeah.
So all of this stuff happened in your life. You were forced to be independent from a really young age. Yeah. You're on your own with your brother in the UK. You experienced racism.
Yeah.
You were
Islamophobia. All of these things.
You're working, double what anyone should have been working, or like actually probably even more because you were still very young. You're working a full-time job. You're like trying to get into medical school. You managed to get there. And then you experience this huge inequality where other people are being looked after. The parents have more resources. You don't take any time off. You're like working throughout the holiday period.
Yeah.
And also you're feeling like you have to prove yourself more.
This is important as well. Yeah, absolutely. You absolutely feel like you have to improve. You have to prove yourself for sure. Yeah.
So at that time in your life, you feel, I'm not white. I have to work harder
Absolutely.
than a white person in order to get the same results as them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We talk about this. What we talk about decolonizing the curriculum, right? And we talk about like the colonial mindset as well. And I think it still exists, and many people would argue that it still exists, and that there are people who maybe have this superiority complex because of the complexion of their skin or their background or whatever. And yeah, I mean these are sensitive topics, but I think that we need to talk about them. And yeah, definitely, I felt like I internalized the racism and that I wasn't good enough and that I had to compensate because of my ethnicity, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Even though I identify as British, I mean, in the sense I mentioned, I explained why I'm proud to be British, not because of our colonial history, absolutely not because of empire, no, but because I grew up with the British people. I served British society. I suffered with the British people, and that for me, that's what makes me proud to be British. If that makes sense, I hope it makes sense.
And then you struggled psychologically in a really big way at one point. Could you tell me about what that experience was like and what was going on for you, both emotionally and behaviorally? How were you
No,
at that
no. I mean,
point?
I couldn't. I mean, I couldn't function. It was impossible. Like there was this kind of storm in my mind. I couldn't. We talk about the cognitive deficits, right, of major depressive disorder and whatever that can be, bipolar depression, unipolar depression, but you can't concentrate. You can't focus. You have memory problems. You're unable to retain information. You can't function. You don't have the energy. You don't have the motivation. You ruminate. You self-flagellate. You have these cognitive distortions, right? These negative automatic thoughts like, I deserve to be punished. You have this excessive guilt. It can be pathological. It can immobilize you. And this is all of these things I was experiencing. Like I remember, like I would neglect myself. I wouldn't eat. Sometimes I wouldn't be able to get any sleep, or sometimes I would sleep excessively. It was oh my god, like it was rock bottom. It was the darkest period of my life. I just was not able to function, like cognitively, physically. I was in a bad way. I was in a really bad way. Yeah.
How long did that last for?
I was forced to interrupt medical school. This was, I think, at least 6 months, if not longer, 6 to 12 months. And I had to. Remember, I was living in this dilapidated place in Moss Side. I don't know if you know Manchester, but Moss Side unfortunately has a reputation for being a rough area. A lot of shootings over there in Moss Side, and I was living in this terrace house. I mean, it was not conducive of recovery, that's for sure. But I had no other option. I had nowhere to go. That's the only place cheap rent at the time. Yeah.
Where did you go for support at that point?
I think initially I went. Eventually, I was seen by a psychiatrist. But I mean, the contact with psychiatric services, it was like few and far between. Plus, I was in denial as well. So I didn't want other people to. I didn't want a psychiatrist to label me with a whatever mental health condition or a mental disorder or whatever you want to call it, or a mental illness. And so I was trying to distance myself from psychiatric services. What are they going to do? Are they going to start me on some medication that's going to sedate me and change me? And so I had some contact with psychiatric services, but I suffered in silence. Yeah, I suffered in silence. I didn't get any support.
Do you feel that if you'd interacted with them, that it would be even more stigmatizing for you?
I think yeah, there was almost like a dread. I don't think that's the right word, but maybe even, I'll just say maybe I was terrified that if I am labeled with a psychiatric diagnosis, right? So it's like the fault is entirely with me and how I reacted. It's like, you're not resilient enough, right? Or the people who did harm me, the people who did abuse me, the people who did neglect me, they'll say, it's almost in a sense it vindicates them. It absolves them. We did nothing wrong. You have a mental illness, so it's all down to you and your brain chemistry. And like people will say, you see, there we go. We knew that it was, and this was the medical school, by the way. Medical school were like, they brutalized me. What they did to me was like, for me, unconscionable. But
what did they do to you?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, like for example, just one example, real quick. I write about this in my book. Like they made me take a year out and repeat 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like they listen to this. Like they said to me that you had to take a year out because you didn't get back to us before the deadline. I had to respond to their email or something. I'm like, yeah, but there's a war in Lebanon. Like I don't know if my family being killed or not. That's not mitigating circumstances. So if that's not mitigating circumstances, what are mitigating circumstances?
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a year. And then they make you repeat. Then they made me repeat 1 year because there was a 4-week component. There was like we call it a special student component. During that 4-week component, that's when I was learning about the atrocities in Lebanon. So I couldn't do that 4-week component. So I thought mitigating circumstances because of what's happening. And there is such a thing as mitigating circumstances. They're like, no, that's not mitigating circumstances. I'm like, I've just lost 2 years of my life. I mean, medicine's 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it goes beyond that. Oh, it goes beyond what they did. I mean, the person at the time, he's a psychopath. There's a person there, I can't even say his name, because if I say his name, can you believe it? 20 years later, we live in a world that protects the perpetrator and punishes the victim. If I say his name, then I feel that people will attack me. And they'll say that you shouldn't say his name or whatever. But I think you know what I'm trying to say here. But
so what I'm perceiving is that there was someone in academia who was not looking after you. They were.
Oh, he was abusing me.
Yeah.
Oh, go. No, he's narcissistic. He's a psychopath. I'm telling you now, in my capacity now as a consultant psychiatrist, and I guess I have some expertise in assessing personality structure, and I'm familiar with the narcissistic and psychopathic traits and tendencies. This person is a psychopath. He is callous, he is heartless, and he masquerades as if he's caring and kind and compassionate when he's anything but. This person violated me. This person psychologically tortured me. This person mutilated my mind. And this is the person who has a smile on his face. And he says, I'm a doctor. And they lull you into that false sense of security when you're at your most vulnerable, and then they violate. And people don't believe you. Why? I'll tell you why. Because when you meet him, he has someone next to him who makes notes. And they corrupt that report. And they weaponize that report. Do you honestly think they're going to include anything in that report that's going to incriminate them? Of course not. You don't know at the time. You don't know any better at the time. You don't bring something with you to record what happened. I wish I did. So that was another layer of my trauma that I don't really talk about that much, but I don't mind. Right?
I guess you could, because we hear these stories of like the corporate sociopath, you know, it's kind of like someone in academia, in the medical industry who's like operating as a sociopath, but a lot of people are not seeing it because of the charm, the charisma, the accomplishments.
Absolutely, exactly. And you know this charm is superficial, right? But they can be very manipulative too. They manipulate you, yeah. And you don't even know what the dark triad is, right? You don't know what these Machiavellian personality traits are, right? At the time, you don't know any better.
Yeah.
And this person is textbook narcissist, and you don't think he's ever capable of harming you, because the first, you know, that the Hippocratic oath, the first oath that we do in medicine is to do no harm, right? But he masquerades as if he's a healer, and he's not. This person is, you know, and I'll never forget him to this day, what he did to me. And I met him of all people when I was at my most vulnerable.
So this is a really significant thing that happened to you. That you wanted this career so much for yourself. Medicine was everything to you. You wanted to be accomplished in this career. You wanted to achieve that career path. And someone had sort of these puppet strings attached to you.
I mean, it's not just me. Yeah, I think medical students, because I think most medical students, many medical students, if not most, it's their dream to become a doctor, you know. And so, what are you willing to endure, and what are you willing to accept? Is it even abuse? Is it even trauma? Is it even psychological torture? Whatever, for you to, because the medical school ultimately gives you that degree. I can't become a doctor, and so they can get away with a lot. Yeah, and that's the thing. So it's like you're, and what can you do? I don't have a leg to stand on, right? I'm a medical student. I have a mental illness. I'm a medical student of color. I'm a Muslim. Talk about all these stigmatizing, these deeply discrediting attributes, right? And it's him, white consultant, doctor, and my word against his. I don't have a chance, right? They'll believe him every single time, even though he's fabricating and he's lying. So that was the reality, unfortunately. Yeah.
Did you fear that he was going to take your potential career?
Absolutely. He could easily. That's what you fear. You live in fear that you're not going to become a doctor, and that's your worst nightmare, isn't it? It's not just me. Like if you read the Hippocratic Oath, not only does it say do no harm, but it says, this art is as dear to me as my own children. So if you take that art away from me, you're taking my children away from me, right? And if you're a parent, if you're a mother or your father, can you imagine that somebody taking your children away from you? You'd be horrified. Don't take my art away from me. Yeah. So you live in fear that it'll be taken away from you, right? And so that there's that dynamic already, that power dynamic already. And that's why I'm so concerned about, the mental health and well-being of medical students, because they're so vulnerable when they, it's like this kind of machine, this beast that we call medical school, right? And the people who run the medical school, who are these people, right? The committee, right? Who's this progress committee? Do we know much about them? Are they regulated?
Do you think this forcing you to repeat this year, do you think that was an attempt to try and get you to leave the profession?
It was an attempt to punish me. Definitely. Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness, yeah. It was vindictive, 100%. Not repeating this 1 year. They made me repeat 2 years.
Yeah, repeat 2 years. 2 years. So a lot of people in that situation would give up.
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, and I thought about it. Oh, my God. It was like, like I said, 5 years is long enough, but 8 years, you're in this liminal stage where, you're not making any money. You have no status in society. You have people, unfortunately, because of the hidden curriculum and the culture, you have like people who are more senior than you, bullying you, trying to humiliate you. And of course, you contemplate giving up, of course. But, I'm a fighter, right? But it's interesting because sometimes when you feel you don't have any more fight in you, at that moment, for whatever reason, you can call that divine intervention, nobody attacks you. But then when people start attacking you, you have a bit more fight in you. But the point I'm making is there are moments in my life when I had no fight in me. If they attacked me, then I would have given up. Unfortunately, during those moments when I had no fight in me, I was relatively spared. But that's why my favorite quote is from Dylan Thomas: "Do not go gentle into that good night, but rage against the dying of the light." Right? I mean, if they're gonna fight me, I'm gonna put up a fight, and here I am today because I put up that fight. And so you keep on fighting that good fight.
So the 2 years that you had to repeat, was it 2 years in a row or two
separate
years? No,
so what happened is they made me take a year out and then repeat the year. And then after I repeated the year, that was a success. When I entered my 4th year, so they made me repeat the 3rd year. And I passed the 3rd year the 2nd time. And by the way, I never struggled with exams. Medical school, you think it's not to do with knowledge. Yeah. Absolutely not. Yeah, it's not to do with knowledge at all. I always passed my exams. It was the 4th, then they made me repeat the 4th year. And that was purely vindictive. That was vindictive, yeah. That was clear.
So you never failed exams.
No.
You had to redo all the lectures all over again, all the coursework all over again.
All over again.
Even though you had mitigating circumstances, there was a war in your home country.
Yeah. More than that, yeah. And they it was, for me, it was personal. This was personal. Don't get me wrong. I met some people who were amazing. Like there's one person, like I can say his name because I paid tribute to him in my book Breakthrough. His name is Professor Jed Byrne. This man is like a godsend. Like he is my guardian angel. Like that, I even tested him, and to this day, like decades later, we're still. He actually nominated me to become a professor at Cardiff University. So he was amazing. He had my back because he could see what was going on. So there are good people, but there were also people who were against me as well. I guess, you don't elicit indifference.
So you pushed through and you fought back and these people tried to, I guess, get you to leave.
Yeah, derail me, sabotage me, end me, or there's one person he actually wanted to end me, I would say. There's one person in particular, definitely, the one who psychologically tortured me. Oh yeah, that was more than just derail me. And what he did to me, like, it was criminal, I would say, even.
Was there some kind of mind games?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I remember when I was at my most vulnerable and I was applying for a hardship fund, and they rejected my hardship fund, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, well, I'm not eating. Like, how can you reject my hardship fund? So then when I met him again, he's like, he would say, okay, so why should you, the way he was doing it, he was very kind of, the word isn't theatrical, but he came across as very sincere. Tell me why. He knew that I applied for the hardship fund, and I poured my heart out. I told him everything. He's like, tell me more, open up, confide everything. So I told him everything. I'll never forget this. He whispered into my ear, you've been through enough conflict already. Then I got a letter to the post thinking this was, then he made it seem like he was going to authorize the hardship fund. I get a letter to the post like the next week thinking it's the hardship fund, and there was absolutely no mention whatsoever about the hardship fund. So basically he's saying, look, he knew, that's how cunning he was. He made it, he said, look, confide in me. And I find this difficult to articulate because it was so traumatizing. And, you try to organize your thoughts and your feelings, but I was pouring, you confide in him, you make yourself vulnerable, you think that he actually cares about you. And he's like, look, he's like, I can be so close to you. And you're not even aware that I'm manipulating you right now. And he violated me. It was a violation. I still to this day, okay, look, you know what? I don't know how this is going to sound. Right. Let's say you won't relate to this, but the blokes out there will relate to this. You go to your family doctor, you say, I'm having difficulty passing urine. What's a common cause of difficulty passing urine as an older man? Whatever, prostate cancer, right? Like, okay, so I've got to do something called a DRE. What's a DRE? A digital rectal examination. Okay. So the doctor will say, do you consent to it? You're like, well, of course, because you're palpating for an enlarged prostate gland. So you could, because you think this is in my best interest. And then you discover later on that the doctor carried out a digital rectal examination and there was no evidence that there was an enlarged prostate. He deceived you. And basically you come out and he's saying to you, I can stick my finger up your ass and you don't even know it. And so this is what that guy did to me. I'm violating you, and you think I'm doing this because I want to heal you. I don't, because I want, and I know that you're going to ruminate on this because he knew me really well. This is the kind of evil that's evil. That was the kind of evil I was dealing with.
And I'm assuming at this point in your life, you didn't open up to people. You weren't.
No, I was very selective. No, I was very selective. Absolutely. Nobody knew me back then. I didn't have a platform like I have now. So yeah, it was harrowing. It was really traumatic. Yeah.
Was it one of your first experiences of being truly emotionally vulnerable, and you felt like you were safe?
Yeah. Yeah.
To be completely betrayed.
Yeah, I mean to be betrayed, but to violate it to the degree. Like honestly, like I think if I wasn't more resilient, if it wasn't for my Islamic faith, I would have killed myself.
Really?
Oh yeah. No. What he did was obliterated my nervous system. What he did, it's unbelievable what he did. Like, and he called himself a doctor. And like I said, because he had someone else next to him, there's a reason when they make notes. It's also to protect you, because he's in the position of power. Don't forget, doctors are in a position of power. Do no harm. You're in a position of power. You can't because you've made that oath.
Yeah.
But what happens if you've done something that's offended him, and now he wants to, to take revenge? Maybe he doesn't like you. But he can't abuse that power because he's made that oath. But then he's got someone next to him making notes, and they can just omit what they want and they can fabricate what they want. So they weaponize it. It protects them. So that's what happened.
So you confided in this man. You shared your deepest, darkest secrets. He made you feel very safe.
Not deepest, darkest secrets. My vulnerability. Yeah, I wasn't saying maybe secrets, but I wouldn't say I wasn't like hiding. It was just when you've been betrayed, right? You become more selective, don't you? Because you know that when you make yourself vulnerable and you confide, that can increase your risk of someone betraying you, right? Or whatever. And that can be very painful, right? And that can be in a romantic relationship or whatever type of relationship. So I was just very selective with this person. I was lonely. I was isolated. I was disconnected. And I just confided. It's like confiding in your therapist, for example, right? Your therapist has a lot of power. Why? Because you are at your most vulnerable and you are confiding in that person. And and that therapist can potentially harm you. In the same way they can heal you, they can harm you, right?
Yeah.
But they shouldn't because they're regulated, and then and you think that they want what's best for you. But unfortunately, that's not the world we're living in.
And I guess in this circumstance, it kind of was like he was in the same position as a therapist, because you confide in your therapist because you hope that they'll help you.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's exactly what happened. Yeah, and don't forget he's a doctor as well, so that again that disarms you. There was no guard, by the way. There was no guard. I was there. I was his for the taking. And he took me and he did so without hesitation. He did it. It was so much finesse as well. Like God knows how many times he's done this, because like I said, it was with so much ease and finesse. This is like a textbook psychopath. Very callous, very hurtful person. Yeah.
I think the thing that I'd like to mention at this point is the felt sense of it happening, because when we experience these dark souls, often when you try to explain, this is just in my opinion, when you try to explain what happened, it doesn't really emphasize the felt sense of
Exactly.
taken
Yeah.
advantage
And you
of
can't.
in this way.
Absolutely. This is really important what you're saying, because I'm trying to explain. I can't. I don't have the words for it.
Yeah.
I don't have something that you exactly. So can you imagine that if you're a victim of, I don't know, sexual violence or whoever, if you feel that you've been violated, you can't verbalize it. It's something you experience, like you said. You can't. That's I guess the limitation of language.
Yeah.
And you try your best, as powerful as language is, you try your best to express, the enormity of that violation, and you can't. You don't have. Sometimes you don't have the vocabulary for it.
Yeah.
You don't know you can't put it into words. And I think that's why maybe narrative exposure therapy is so powerful for refugees populations, right? You see the children, they are experiencing whatever it might be, a genocide, and they don't have the words for it. They try to express themselves through painting or through drawing, right? And so that's the power of narrative exposure therapy. You equip them with the vocabulary, and because that narrative has become fragmented, because that's what trauma does, and then you, in a sense, you empower them. You say, okay, this is your story, this is your testimony, right? And that, in a sense, can be validating and empowering and therapeutic and cathartic.
I think that because you're clearly an empathic individual, you would only assume that other people have that within them. So the manipulation and the thinking behind, I'm going to ruin this person, and the calculated, they talk about this uncanny valley with sociopaths or psychopaths, and it's this very chilling kind of feeling when people realize the darkness that goes behind someone who doesn't have empathy.
This is really important. This is so important, Becky. Thank you, because I'm hoping that my experience. I don't want to be, like in a sense, selfish. Like, sure, this is my story, but there's a solace in shared experience, isn't there? There might be some universality in what I'm going through, and there are so many victims of narcissistic abuse, and who are trapped in these harmful relationships because they might be trauma bonded, right? And it's like, maybe my words and my feelings and my experiences, they can identify with what I'm saying, and then that identification can be, in a sense, therapeutic or cathartic. It's not just me, because that's what the narcissist does. The narcissist makes you question your own reality, right? Did this actually happen, right? Am I overreacting? Am I being too sensitive? That's what they do. They gaslight you, right? And you say, when someone else hears this, they're like, oh my God, I can relate to that. Oh my God, it's not me. It's what happened to me. It's the person I was in a romantic relationship with, or it could be my employer, or it could be someone else. So, I would definitely say I'm, I guess, a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and I don't think there's enough support out there. Well, first of all, there's not enough accountability. It's almost like the focus is on the victim, right? And we need to provide them with more support, and there's something wrong with them. But no, the perpetrator also needs to be held accountable, right? And I think without that accountability, it doesn't matter how many Zumba classes you attend, it doesn't matter how much therapy you receive, that wound will not fully heal, and the trauma will remain unresolved.
What happened? So somehow you pushed through, somehow you fought back.
Yeah, I fought back. I did. I remember, I think one of the most important things was graduating, getting out of that hellhole.
What was that like, the day you graduated?
It's interesting. People thought like, oh yeah, go to the graduation. But I actually didn't go. Yeah. That was my protest. Because now I can actually, because you feel so disempowered. Like you just have to conform, accept, all the abuse that you are receiving. There's nothing that you can do about it. No one's going to believe you, And so then you get to graduation day. I'm like, you know what? I protest. I now can decide if I go to graduation or not. And I'm not going to go. Shame on you. You think you can get away, and you will get away with this. Yeah, and shame. You should be ashamed of yourself. I can't believe that you can wake up in the mirror. We could wake up in the morning. You can actually look at your own reflection in the mirror. How can you do that? You can be so cruel and so heartless and so callous and so wicked. So get out of there. Whatever you call that medical school. I don't know what you call that. I want nothing to do with that. Let me get out of there. So that was, I think, one of the most important factors that contributed to my recovery was getting out of that hellhole. And then that's when you feel like you have been emancipated in a sense. And then now you talk about, that kind of liberation psychology, right? And you've been liberated, definitely, So, yeah, and that's when I was like, you know what? I've got this fire burning in my belly and I've got this thunder in my heart to realize my potential and to be someone, right? One of my favorite songs is from Tracy Chapman, Fast Car, and that I would always listen to it on repeat. I believe that I can be someone. Get a fast car and keep on driving. Get out of that situation and go. There's a whole world out there, right? And I feel like I know that I can contribute. I know I can give something back. I know that I can be someone. I can be someone, right? I can realize my dream. I can leave my mark on this world. I can be that positive influence, hopefully.
How did you then choose psychiatry?
Yeah, I mean, so then you're naive, aren't you? You think, oh wow, psychiatry, right? Oh my God, like the mind, I've got these wounds, right? And so a psychiatrist is the healer, right? So that was maybe my naive construct of what the psychiatrist is. And then you learn about the world of psychiatry, and it's it's not what you initially think it is. And you and don't get me wrong, there are some incredibly compassionate, kind, caring psychiatrists. But then you learn about the different, I guess, motives and the power dynamic and the medical model and psychotropic medication and detain this person under the Mental Health Act. I remember a patient once said, I'll never forget this, talking to their psychiatrist, right? The psychiatrist comes and the first thing the patient looks at the psychiatrist and says, you come to me with your prescription pad and your section papers and you say you want to heal me. Like it's power, isn't it? You come all over, can't you just have that human connection with me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what appealed to me the most, was the human connection.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why psychiatry spoke to me the most. So I definitely felt like my lived experiences were an asset, and that they would make me a more empathic healer, and that I would be able to connect with the people receiving care from me. It would be like more authentic. Use that vulnerability and that human connection. So I think that's why I kind of gravitated to psychiatry.
Human connection in psychiatry is such these are powerful words that often don't go together, and I don't hear them very often when I speak to psychiatrists.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think maybe that's why I don't feel like I can really connect with a lot of psychiatrists. Maybe how many psychiatrists reenact scenes from famous films like Pulp Fiction, that scene with Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta, Ezekiel 25:17, and that's what I do in my Wounded Healer presentations and performances, and I'm a different kind of psychiatrist, and so I am going to ruffle some feathers, I'm going to rock the boat, but we need to be disruptive, right? Because it can't continue, right? And hence why I feel we need to embrace our vulnerability. You may have heard of, physician heal thyself. What about physician reveal thyself? Maybe by revealing we are healing, right? Because when we share, it can be therapeutic. It can be cathartic. Why not? Why not share?
Yeah.
What's the issue? I don't get me wrong. It's like I don't share in a clinical context. Sometimes I do. Yeah. It's not about me. It's about the person receiving care from me. But if I can plant the seeds of hope into their hearts, if they say I'll never recover, I'm saying, well, I can relate to that. Because once I was in that dark and lonely place myself, and I did succumb to despair. But not only that did I recover, because we talk about surviving, right? So why settle for surviving when we can thrive? Why not, right? And so if I share my story, and I have, and that gives, I've got patients who can't thank me enough for sharing my story with them, because it gives them hope. Yeah. It's a story of hope. That's the whole point.
When you treat someone, how much medication do you like to prescribe?
I don't like to prescribe medication. I prefer non-pharmacological approaches. Yeah. I think that the threshold for prescribing psychiatric drugs is too low.
Yeah.
And that there's a lot we can do before we get our prescription pads out. And it's not just me. I do a lot of work with the World Health Organization, like Dr. Michelle Funk and her team. And they have developed something called quality rights, which is like an approach to mental health that is grounded on a human rights framework. And so, for example, lifestyle interventions, like hence why I run like 5 to 7 days per week, 15 kilometers at 20 kilometers per day.
Yeah.
I do that for my sanity.
Yeah.
I do that for my mental health.
What is it about movement for you
Oh God,
that changes
movement,
everything?
right? Like move. That's the word, isn't it? It's movement. It gives you that it gives you that confidence and that self belief. Because when you are depressed, right, you lack self confidence, you lack self belief. It's almost like you have no agency as well. And I feel like you were taking control. So that helps. But then movement in and of itself, right? We know that you get the heart starts beating more, and it's pumping more blood, and you have the endogenous endorphins and all the different kinds of hormones and neurochemicals and neurotransmitters and whatever. And then you have people like I don't know if you know Brenton Stubbs, Professor Brenton Stubbs. He's like one of the most highly cited scholars in the world. I think he's got like 1,000 publications, and he's the world authority on exercise and mental health. And there's so much data out there that proves that movement, physical activity, exercise are incredibly beneficial for your mental health. I think in some studies, as effective, if not more effective than psychiatric drugs. And guess what? No adverse effects, right? But for me, it's like that. It's that self-confidence, isn't it? Because you don't have the motivation and energy to get out of bed when you are depressed. And now you're going for a run 15 kilometers per day or 20 kilometers per day. And it reminds you of what the physical body is capable of. But it's the mind as well, isn't it? Because the mind gives up before the body. So when I'm going for a run, I remind myself, if I feel like throwing the towel in, the mind gives up before the body. There's still plenty more gas left in the tank. So for me, it's definitely that confidence. But that's the psychological benefits. But obviously the biological and the physiological changes as well. And I'm sure there are clever people who have conducted plenty of scientific studies on that. But I can certainly share my experiences.
Have you worked with people who've been on very high doses of psychiatric medication for a very long time and they wanted to come off
Of
it?
course they do. Of course I have. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And we try to work towards that. So, I mean, in the same way that we have a prescribing plan, right? Any prescribing plan should also come with a deprescribing plan, right? The art and science of deprescribing. And so in psychiatry circles, we have something called the MPG, the Maudsley Prescribing Guidelines, right? So you've the Maudsley Hospital in Southeast London. We have the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, some of the most prestigious psychiatric hospitals in the world. I did my training. In South London and Maudsley, in Southeast London. And so the MPG is the Bible, right? We call it the Bible. This is what we refer to, right? It's a reliable and reputable source of information. And I think we have like 11 editions now, the 12th edition, right? And only recently has the first edition of the Maudsley Prescribing Guidelines been released, right?
Wow.
So, I mean, why did it take that long for the first edition? And with any prescribing plan, there must be a deprescribing plan. A lot of patients, they ask me, am I going to be on medication for the rest of my life? No, you don't have to be. I'm not on medication. I live with a severe or serious mental illness. And dare I say it, I'm not only surviving, but I'm thriving.
Yeah.
So again, that's an example of how sharing our story can be so powerful, right? You don't have to be in medication for the rest of your life. Don't get me wrong. I think in the acute phase, it can be necessary and indeed life-saving. It depends on the individual. How we metabolize medication, factors like age, gender, race. I was prescribed, whatever, I'll say it now, Seroquel, right, quetiapine, right? It knocked me out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about metabolic syndrome, right? What's metabolic syndrome? Obesity, diabetes, other risk factors, high blood pressure, hypercholesterolemia, right? No, I don't want that. This isn't helping for me. This isn't a long-term solution for me. It wasn't even a short-term solution for me. So if a patient wants to be on medication, I can discuss the risks and the benefits. But I always say I don't think this is a long-term solution. We need to be holistic.
Yeah.
And we can prescribe these medications, but at some point if you want to as well, let's work collaboratively, right? Let's get you off these medications.
What do you do when you have a patient who's they seem quite sedated on medication to the point they're not connecting with you, you're not sensing they're present with you?
Yeah.
And they, let's just say, have schizophrenia. What would your plan be for someone like this?
I mean, so the question is how much of that is attributable to the medication and how much of that is attributable to the condition? Because it's often a trade-off, isn't it? It's often a trade-off between the severity of the adverse effects of the medication and the severity of the symptoms of the condition. So I think it takes expertise to be able to determine is this a cognitive deficit of negative symptom or or conceptual disorganization or whatever term we use. But if we feel this is purely attributable to the medication, then of course we look at reducing the dose of the medication. But sometimes, like, I don't know if you've heard of something called hyperbolic tapering.
What is this?
So hyperbolic tapering is, for example, let's say you're on whatever, Ciprodex, right? Let's say you're on escitalopram 20 milligrams, right? And you're like, I want to get off my SSRI, right? So then you think, okay, so the family doctor might say, let's do 15 milligrams for 1 week, 10 milligrams for 1 week. So it's almost like linear, isn't it?
Yeah.
20, 15, 10, 5, off. It doesn't work that way. Because anyone who's been on SSRIs long term knows that you can have withdrawal effects. Mm-hmm. They can be brutal, especially with Effexor, venlafaxine, brain zaps, things like that, flu-like symptoms. It can be brutal.
Yeah.
So it's not like a linear discontinuation, something called hyperbolic. So when you get closer to zero, for example, it wouldn't be, let's say with Ciprodex, it wouldn't be 20, 10, 5, 0. It would be 20, 10, 7.5, 5, 4.5. 4, 3.5. It becomes microdosing. It almost becomes, then you need liquid formulations. So that helps you to come off it, and that's what we call hyperbolic tapering. So if someone is sedated and it's attributable to the psychotropic medication, then I would, and not because of their mental health condition, absolutely reduce the dose. But it's not linear. It might be, it has to be like so. It can be so small. We talk about microdosing, right? And it can be, and that's the thing. It can be a long and drawn out process, especially with benzos. A lot of people want benzos.
Yeah.
Alprazolam, right? There's a reason why Xanax was the most prescribed psychiatric drug in the world at one point. I get it, because the symptoms of anxiety are crippling. I understand, and alprazolam, the wonder drug, right? The anxiety symptoms have gone. I want some more of that, please. Yes, please. But what happens with alprazolam? Addiction, dependence, tolerance. You need more and more of it to get the desired effects. And that's the concern. My heart goes out to you. I completely understand why you want the alprazolam, but this isn't a long-term solution. Some people, don't get me wrong, can take it long-term and they don't notice any adverse effects. But there's always the risk. And the question is, do you really want to take the risk? And I have to share that information. But I have the prescribing power. Ultimately, it's my decision to make. And my obligation is to do no harm. I have a responsibility, so it's difficult.
What do you think about metabolic psychiatry?
Ooh, what do you mean by metabolic psychiatry exactly?
That diet can...
lifestyle interventions, you mean, like?
In particular, I'm curious about your thoughts on bipolar and the keto diet. Have you heard anything about this?
I thought, I've heard about this before, yes, if that's what you mean, yeah. And I thought that's what you meant, but I wanted to clarify. I don't think we have as much data and not enough research is being conducted in this area, unsurprisingly, because if you think about psychotropic medication, the pharmaceutical companies are generating billions in revenue, right? How much revenue is generated from metabolic psychiatry, right? Not as much, right?
Not very much at all.
No, yeah, exactly. Not exactly. So we don't have a lot of data and evidence in that field. But again, I think we just have to keep an open mind and an open heart. But like other branches of medicine, psychiatry has to be evidence-based. And so if there is any reluctance, it's only because there's not enough data or evidence out there that has been conducted in that specific area.
Why do you think that a lot of patients who are put on psychiatric medication are given no exit plan, and that they end up thinking it's an indefinite thing, that they'll probably be on this medication for life, and that they're just given the script with no conversation about where will the exit plan be?
Yeah, it might be culture. Maybe we've been doing this for a very long time. It might be perceived as radical as well. It might be an abdication of power. We talk about the power dynamic between provider and receiver of care. It might be ignorance as well. And so I think all of those factors are contributing to, and then also continuity of care. And we talk about the treatment gap, right? I mean, how long do you have to wait until you get an ADHD assessment here in the UK, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get one, what's the likelihood of having ongoing care? So I think there's definitely a treatment gap. There's a shortage of mental health care specialists. There's a huge demand for services. I think, a lot of the healing is happening outside of psychiatry, if I'm honest with you. And it's interesting now because I create content. It's something I feel very passionate about. And we are not showing leadership in the online spaces. So there are people who don't have the same qualifications as us, the same training as us, and they might be. And it's fantastic that we provide a platform to people living with a mental health condition. I support that, but we have to be careful because they might be sources of misinformation, and that can ultimately cause more harm than good. And I think that we need more mental health care professionals on social media platforms like Instagram or TikTok, sharing their knowledge, sharing their expertise, because a lot of the healing is happening through psychoeducation outside of the clinical spaces.
What do you think about ADHD medication?
Well, it's not just what I think; it's what many people with ADHD taking stimulants think, and they say it's not only life-changing but life-saving, right? But again, it has adverse effects, especially in younger populations. You have appetite suppression, right, and it can stunt your growth, and so you have to weigh up the risks and the benefits. But I personally prefer non-pharmacological approaches, but it's down to the individual. Depends on the severity of your symptoms, mild, moderate, or severe, how much distress there is, how much impairment in your functioning there is. Something that you definitely need to discuss with your psychiatrist for sure.
We get a lot of phone calls from parents calling saying, my 4-year-old, I can't cope with their behavior. Please, can we have ADHD medication for them?
Yeah.
I have friends who started ADHD medication at 7 years old, very young. There's research, that is out there that says this will help the child in later life.
Sure.
But what do you think the chances are that actually some of these people become addicted to illegal substances because they're learning from a very young age that how I regulate is from taking a medicine?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, is that the message that we are giving, right? That there is, I guess, a chemical solution, right? Not that I'm attacking anyone or criticizing any parents who do want to go down that pathway, but I think we have to be mindful of what the consequences of that decision, what they can be. And one of them is, like you said, it might be that we start self-medicating, right? It's what we call chemical coping, right? And it becomes blurry, doesn't it? Okay, if this drug is regulated, why isn't that drug? It's just a drug, it's just a chemical, right? So yeah, what are the consequences of that? I mean, I think again, there's a lot that can be achieved through maybe coaching or reasonable accommodations and adjustments and things like that. It's amazing what can be achieved. I mean, a lot of people end up getting diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood because they have that scaffolding, don't they? They have that support system in place. They have that structure in their lives, and so by providing them with that structure and that, for example, coaching as well, these are all non-pharmacological approaches that I think can improve outcomes in children who have ADHD.
Often people want the quick fix.
Exactly, that's the thing. It's exactly, and the same thing happens with treating common mental disorders in primary care, right? You go see your GP, he has 10 minutes, 15 minutes. There's a prescription for some whatever, Prozac, fluoxetine, Zoloft, sertraline, away you go, right? And plus, sometimes that's what the patient wants too. I just want a quick fix, yeah. And unfortunately, that's not always the solution.
What do patients say when you don't want to give them that prescription?
You have those difficult conversations. Yeah. I mean, they can say all kinds of things, and they can even be abusive towards you, and that doesn't happen often. It's difficult, and I think you have to also be able to manage your own emotions as well, because you can get defensive, and it's almost like you feel like you're being attacked, like you don't have whatever the credentials or you don't have what it takes, and then you try to be professional, obviously, but we're human beings, but it's important to be professional, and then you can say, look, if you don't agree with my opinion, you might have a spiel or a script, you can get a second opinion, but genuinely, this is coming from a good place. I just don't feel that the benefits outweigh the risks at this moment in time. Maybe we can revisit in the future, but I just don't think at this moment in time the benefits outweigh the risks.
So you're providing good quality information, and then they can make an informed choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they can make an informed choice, of course. Because it's informed consent, isn't it? Like but ultimately, if we feel that it's not going to be beneficial, then it no longer becomes an option, right? Depending on what comorbidities the patient has. It might be that this medication, if they didn't have this condition, this risk factor, then we would prescribe it for them. Yeah.
That's You know, it's interesting because I know a lot of psychiatrists in my working life, and I think that sometimes, depending on what their interest is, some of them feel like their only skill is to give that script, and there's like the pressure, or if they haven't trained in psychotherapy approaches, or if they're not so aware of these other things that can lead to success, so they kind of almost feel like the only thing I can do is prescribe.
Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't surprise me that a lot of psychiatrists feel that way. It might be because of their training. It might be because of their personality types. I mean, I find that a lot of patients, they just want that external validation and empathy, really. And that goes a long way. And we don't have to prescribe, a medication for that. I mean, sometimes I even just say it, if you are living in poverty and if you have accommodation insecurity, I'll just say, I think the best antidepressant for you right now is, getting some more financial support and, having accommodation security. And it's amazing how the patients react, because they get that validation, they get that external validation. And you say to them, look, I'm sorry, you're going through a tough time.
Yeah.
I don't think, I'm probably the first person to say that to you. Maybe you are in this, in this abusive relationship, and your romantic partner, well, they should be romantic, but your partner is a narcissist, and they are gaslighting you, and they're minimizing your experiences. And when I say to them, you're going through a tough time, that sounds like, you are being abused, and that these boundaries are being transgressed. Just hearing that from someone else can be hugely, I think, therapeutic for patients.
Because if someone is in that situation, a narcissistic relationship, and you're prescribing antidepressants to them, anti-anxiety medication, in my opinion, they're checking out emotionally, and they're not able to feel the emotions that would eventually guide them to safety.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if we're not, I feel that all negative emotions are our guides. Even though it feels horrible, I would say that no negative emotion is bad. It's trying to give us a message. So
that's the thing, message, exactly. And that's how I frame it as well. There's a message in that pain, right? Maybe we have some blind spots. Why is it that we keep on entering relationships like this, right? There's a message in that pain, for sure.
So would you be direct with someone if you're really picking up on they're in a narcissistic relationship, they're experiencing particularly the invisible type of abuse, so not where they're being physically abused, but that it's something
I would
coercive.
I mean, obviously we want to be mindful of how the person receiving care from us might react if we share that information with them. It might be that they have that awareness already, but they are trapped. There's nothing that they can do, right? But if they don't have that awareness, you remind me of this quote by Carl Jung, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will dictate our lives, and we will call it fate. And we'll say, can you see what's going on here? Can you see the pattern? Why is it that you are a people pleaser? What is it about your background? Were you neglected? Were you emotionally starved as a child? And can you see how that increases your vulnerability to entering certain romantic relationships? You meet someone, he starts love bombing you, and you finally get the attention and the validation that you've been longing for your entire life. I don't think you can see that. And we need to open your eyes, and you need to be able to identify these blind spots. So I'm doing a lot of that in my clinic, and I think psychiatrists need to get better at providing psychotherapy.
Yeah. You seem to be offering a very well integrated approach. And this is my frustration with the industry, because I'm a psychologist, but I hire psychiatrists for a living, and my company is more psychiatry than it is talking therapy. But I'm in both worlds, and they're so disjointed.
Yeah.
Psychiatrists think in a very different way, and they're a very different, in general, personality than therapists. So they don't really communicate, and then they don't train in each other's approaches. Not that we can train medically, but we can learn as much as we can, and we can ask questions, and we can communicate. And then psychiatrists can train in therapy, but often in the UK they don't so much. In Ireland they do a lot more. It's it's very interesting what happens in different countries with psychiatry, but I feel it's very disjointed in terms of holistic care.
Very much so, and almost feels like we are like working in silos, right? And like it's psychiatrists in one silo and psychology, and it shouldn't be like that. We should be holistic. It should be integrated. It needs to be multidisciplinary. And I think, if anything, I can speak to, I guess, my own profession. We need more humanity and humility in psychiatry, for sure.
Yeah. What are you working on at the moment that you're really passionate about?
Oh, what am I working at? I'm so creating a lot of content, which I'm really enjoying. What else am I doing? I'm doing some work with the World Health Organization on human rights. So I'm going to hopefully Indonesia, Jakarta, in November. I went to Ukraine twice. I went to Kiev with the World Health Organization, and we were training mental health care providers there. We were giving them some training about the World Health Organization quality rights, which is an approach to mental health grounded on a human rights framework. So keeping myself busy. I was just co-editing my 5th textbook on Islamophobia and psychiatry with Springer. That was interesting. I continue to give lectures globally. So I have a keynote lecture coming up in Warwick next month. So keeping myself busy.
And where can people find you if they're looking for you on social
Yeah,
media?
no, they can connect with me on, I have different, I'm on X, I'm on Instagram. My largest community is on TikTok. So Prof. Ahmed Hankir, I post daily content about mental health.
And my final question is, will you ever call yourself the healed healer?
No one's ever asked me that question before. That's another quote from Carl Jung. Find me a sane person and I will cure them. Do we fully heal? Do we really fully heal? Like, I don't want to misinform people, right? We carry these wounds and they're not like, that's, in a sense, it's like my badge of honor. I don't know. I can't. These wounds that I've sustained have changed me, like irreversibly, right? And not necessarily in a bad way, but there are, like, in the same way you might have like a scar that will be visible for the rest of your life and you might want to conceal that scar, I think for me that's character, that's character, be proud of that scar. That's how I frame it. Be proud of that scar, I don't want to be perfect. John Legend, right? This is how my mind works. I love you. I love everything about you. All your curves and all your edges, all your perfect imperfections. Celebrate your imperfections. No, I don't want to be a healed healer. I'm a wounded healer.
Ahmed, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for sharing all of this insight with me.
Thank you for having me.
I feel very honored.
Thank you for listening. No, I can't thank you enough. I'm grateful to join you.
Thank you.
Amazing.